Asia or Jessica, if you guys could let folks in as they show up, that would be super helpful. If you don't know me, my name is Sunny Summers. I'm a senior policy advisor with the Oregon Department of Ag. I'm also the rules coordinator for the agency, so I'm going to be running today's Rules Advisory Committee meeting, RAC, otherwise known as a RAC. I'd like to remind everybody that RAC meetings are open to the public. However, only invited RAC members are asked to speak during the meeting. 1 second here. So, that was one of our invited RAC members having a little bit of trouble with Teams. How I'm going to start the meeting is roll call of those invited RAC members, and then I'll put up a copy of the proposed draft rules that we're working off of. Again, for RAC members, my apologies that the formatting is wonky. Word would not play nice at about 8 o'clock last Friday evening, so we did the best we could. With that, let's start with Seth Crawford.
I'm here, Sunny. Sorry.
No worries. Good morning, Seth. Jeff, you're here. Michael Noonan?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, you're on the phone, Michael. You're the 541. Got it. You may have to jump in and catch our attention, but I will try to remember that you're on the phone. Bonnie Jo Peterson.
Hello, Bonnie Jo Peterson here, and I will try to get on Teams shortly.
Awesome. Thank you, Bonnie Jo. Courtney Moran.
Good morning, Sunny. Good morning, everyone.
Thank you. Joel Thompson. I see you. Not hearing you. I'm not sure which mic it's trying to grab, Joel. Might try logging out and logging back in, or joining via phone as well. You bet. Thank you. David Sandiford.
Howdy, I'm here.
Thank you. Chris Griffey. Oh, can't hear you, Chris. Sometimes you have to go up towards your mic and tell it which one to pick. There's a little drop down caret next to the mic button up in the upper right hand corner. Like for mine, I click that caret and then it gives me different options. So like my AirPods, I have to click on it versus my computer speaker. Okay. And then we'll come back to you, Chris. Danette, if you want to introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. Danette Wernette, manager of the ODA Hemp program. I appreciate that everybody's here, especially those on the RAC committee. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation for this, taking the time to review all the proposed amendments, and your feedback is fantastic. I appreciate you in advance.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. And we are recording this if you missed that. So it'll be available on ODA's rulemaking webpage after this meeting. So with that, I'm going to do my best to show my screen here. Bring you all back over, so hopefully I can see what's happening here. Okay. How's that for size? David's giving me the thumbs up. Okay. Awesome. We're going to run through these. So we're starting with the definitions. Danette, if you want to give us some background on the inclusion of barrier and I think update to contiguous.
Yes, so the addition of the word barrier in the definitions came from there being some confusion regarding exactly what would be considered to interrupt the boundaries of a production area. There were some examples where there was a clear division of production areas. So we just wanted to make sure that that was really clear on that. And contiguous, again, it came from folks having questions about what's one production area, what isn't. So we wanted to be clear if there is interruption in between, what makes sense and what doesn't, to make sure that everybody is, doing everything in line with what constitutes one production area versus more, so far as testing and so on. That pretty much sums that up.
Yep. And folks, if you see me going back and forth, it's because I've got two screens and I'm looking at you on one of them. Any comments or thoughts on this before we move on to the next page? Anybody on the phone? RAC members on the phone, Bonnie Joe or Michael? Okay. So clarification on immature plant. Again, I think just an attempt to clarify that definition. Okay. As well as mature hemp plant. Okay, any other comments or questions on anything in the definitions from folks on the RAC?
Sonny, this is Jeff.
Yes.
Not for discussion in this part right here, but still this, what I perceive as a heavy leaning toward flower hemp. And does that encompass then industrial hemp for seed and for biomass stocks, herd fiber? Are those being too much lumped together? And should there be a demarcation between the market classes?
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
Is this working?
Yes. Is that Chris?
That was Joel. Sorry.
Joel.
I think I finally got the mic working. I don't use Microsoft
Perfect.
Teams, but I think I'm good now. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Joel. I know
So
it's
I
not.
might as well check mine as well. Can you hear me now? This is Chris.
Yes, perfect.
Success.
Thank you both for your continued efforts with Teams. It's not always easy. Okay. Any other comments before we move on to the next section?
Hello, Bonnie Joe here. I am wondering, kind of along the lines of Jeff, when we're talking about immature plants, fiber and grain, fiber specifically. So, there's a point where there's going to be a little bit of possible, looks like a flower development, but it's, the pre-flower development where true fiber harvest is going to happen. So is there, how any pistils? I mean, what are, I guess, a little bit more clarification would be good.
Okay. Danette, do you have comments along those lines?
I definitely appreciate you bringing that to specific attention. This is a definition that we've wrestled with a bit because, of course, on the OLCC side, their definition is that a flower would be 2 centimeters or larger at its widest point. Whereas I was trying to take into account there's also mini buds and such, which could be less than that. So we definitely appreciate the feedback on that, and we'll give that further consideration for sure.
Okay. Thanks, Danette.
Mm.
And Sunny, Danette, just Jeff again. Again, it might be good if you were to come, Danette, down to, it's probably too late now, but down into Klamath Falls, where we do have, 12, 14-foot high hemp fiber. You have staggered mature male plants, which are now totally dehiscent. You have some plants with female flower, but and again, a lot of that gets affected by time of planting, and so it's just you're not looking at a uniform, inflorescences being produced, such as on a chemical hemp type plant. So how do we deal with all that variability that's out there?
Okay. Joel?
More of a question, just got high level that I meant to get to earlier when I had the mic issues. How long do we have to make comments or suggestions? I'm asking on behalf of some other just hemp licensees with like Oregon Hemp Alliance. How long do we have to make these suggestions? And is that something that we would be like sending in? And where can we direct folks to do that?
Awesome. Great question, Joel. Thank you for that. So today is a Rules Advisory Committee meeting. We take the information from the group today and make any edits or updates. Our goal, in a perfect world, is to have these filed with the Secretary of State by November 1st. And then that opens the formal public comment process where anybody can provide written, or we'll have a day for verbal comments on the rules. And then we take those into account and make the determination, are there changes that we need to make? Can we make them before filing the rules as final? Or if they're really big changes, do we need to go back to the drawing board and make changes from the beginning and then kind of go back through this process? So I think I'm going to go ahead and speak for Danette. For us, we're open to folks giving us suggestions on these draft rules probably through the middle of next week. But then again, that formal comment process will open in November. And if you go to oda.direct/rulemaking, there is a link on our rulemaking page there where you can sign up for updates on all ODA rulemaking. If you're licensed, you're going to get updates through the hemp list that we also have. So you can get those updates both ways, and that'll tell you how to make public comments once the comment period has opened.
Perfect. Thank you for covering that.
Yep, absolutely. Seth.
This is more of a question for Jeff and Bonnie Joe, specifically relating to that fiber comment. Are you guys concerned about a grower who's trying to grow fiber being able to get a pre-harvest compliance test so that the crop can be certified? Or am I misunderstanding the concern?
I'm looking at it both immediately, Seth, with research and how do we stay in compliance with our research, but then also it leads into what happens to a commercial grower growing fiber. And is it completely under the same rules as you would be thinking for flower hemp, for CBD hemp? It just makes it more difficult for the commercial, what it would be for a commercial fiber grower, and the same for a grain grower, hemp grain grower. However, the hemp grain grower, of course, the plant morphologies, again, it's grown very differently than a flower hemp crop typically is being grown. And so, again, those things kind of get convoluted. And so how do you then look at the sampling, stay in compliance, same rules for testing? You know, it's being looked at as if it's flower hemp in both the fiber and the grain. And so I don't have a solution, Seth, you know, but I think it needs to be discussed to figure out how to demark those market classes.
And from a thanks, Jeff, I appreciate that. And from a regulatory perspective, Sunny and Danette, am I understanding it correctly that this is really just about demarcating when a plant needs to be tested? Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe
Yes, and it also has some effect on, say, our rules that legislature put in saying that we have to accept applications and consider a compliance plan for someone who has started to grow after they put in their application, but before they got licensed. So, you know, that's part of the equation here too.
Yeah,
Thank
I'll
you
make
both.
one more comment. And again, I hope I'm not stirring the pot, messing up the flow here, Sunny and Danette. But for example, here you have, you know, say 12, 15 foot tall hemp fiber crop. You have scattered inflorescences out there. And then the targeting is on the inflorescence for sampling when you've got 12, 15 foot tall plants. You know, you're not blending the entire biomass of the crop. You're targeting what may be just a few inflorescences, because that meets the regulation for how do you sample. So I'm just making that point. And I know this is a problem in other states as well.
Yeah, I would say, Jeff, point well taken, and we are subject to USDA federal rules as well as state legislative rules, and don't yet have a way, I think, to cleanly delineate those market classes as you're describing them.
Yeah, and
But
thank you. I made my point, so I'll stop on it then. Thank you, though,
yeah,
Sunny.
absolutely. Okay, any other comments on definitions before we move on to the next section? Okay.
Bonnie Joe again here. I think to Seth's question, my specific, yes, with what Jeff was mentioning, we have these, different categories, and you have your specific rules you have to follow. But when, going out to the field and it is a fiber crop that's going to be harvested for fiber at the proper time, sometimes it's a little teeny bit further, like Jeff was saying, you'll have some little teeny flowers here and there at that point that aren't actually flowers, they're just starting. And that's real, been a continuing problem with how to handle just the plain fiber that's not going to flower.
Okay,
So
Bonnie Joe. Seth?
that was my reasoning for jumping in.
This all makes sense to me, and I'm just wondering if we couldn't cover everybody's concerns by having, again, it doesn't really apply to the research side, but this will apply to commercial growers. If a commercial grower is producing fiber hemp, maybe they can put that on their pre-harvest compliance report, that don't expect to see a bunch of flowering heads. This is basically going to be essentially a biomass sample. There's just not that many people who are doing that. And frankly, even if you do have like a little flower on your plant, it's still going to have to meet that regulatory requirement of under 0.3% total THC. So to me, this is a good differentiation. It just, maybe we do need to have like a little checkbox on that pre-harvest compliance form specifically for that future case.
And I think I'm Professor Emeritus for all things hemp, so I haven't looked at the application recently, but I think our application even has that checkbox currently about what your intent for growing is. So we do have some of that information already.
It does. And I'll add that I'm working on modifying our applications for various reasons, including that what we had as far as the intended use on our grow site application previously did not match with the verbiage for USDA reporting. So I'm bringing those things in line together by changing our verbiage to match USDA. So it does specify fiber, seed. I can't remember what all the categories are off the top of my head, going too many directions here, but I am looking to match that up, and hopefully that'll help.
Okay. Thanks, Danette. Moving into section 100, Rule 100, licensing generally, cleaning up, clarifying questions that we get during the year. Okay. Moving on to grower licensure. Again, cleaning up and clarifying. Seems to be what we do a lot in this program. Questions, comments?
I think I had one question there of the update of subsection 6. A grower may conduct the following activities if approved. Just curious what the kind of behind of how the department will make those approvals. Is that an application or a request that's submitted proactively?
So again, this goes back to changes in the application too. The Lux the Lux does specify some of these changes. So the local governing body will be able to grant permission on one or both if they're applied for the trimming or the keef or the pre-rolls. I'll make sure that it indicates for the local governing body that they don't have to accept all, nor do they need to deny all if one of them is not within their approval criteria. But the application will have in itself indication that somebody wants those specific endorsements. And then if the Lux matches, we're going to approve.
Great. Okay.
And Lux being a local, a land use compatibility statement that the applicant takes to their local planning department to.
Yeah, if your zoning is approved for that activity, then
Correct.
the department's going to approve it there as well. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that being clarified for the folks who aren't aware on that. Thank you.
Okay. We want to talk about grower endorsements, Danette? That kind of ties into what you were just talking about.
Yeah, so first off, I want to address the transfer of immature plants. That is not a rule change. It's just outlining what our policy and rules have always been based on statute. So we get questions on that every once in a while. So I wanted to make sure that our rules are very clear on that for everybody who's interested. So for grower endorsements, previously, only handlers were able to make pre-rolls. I felt in all fairness that it should match the OLCC side as far as so long as the local governing body is okay with it. I wanted to make sure pre-rolls were an option. Plain pre-rolls, again, nothing added. Make sure that's an option for the growers if the local governing body approves it. The keef and trimming weren't specifically named as endorsements, but because sometimes local governing bodies were approving that, sometimes they weren't. I just wanted to be really clear that those were something that you really needed to pass by them before we could approve that. I think that pretty much is that in a nutshell. So let us know if you have any further questions on that too.
Okay,
And so far
Joel?
as
Oh,
questions
sorry,
or
go ahead.
challenges to these things, I want to make sure that nobody feels like they need to hold that back. I appreciate hearing that feedback. This is a good place for it.
Great. Yeah. I spent some time on some of these, so I'll have a few, but this one was looking through this and I think it's a good clarification, but just curious if first what that THC limit would be on the keef being produced, and then is that keef considered a hemp item or would that be a hemp concentrate? Because it's more of a, I think you could kind of look at it both ways. Does that have to meet the same, is that a concentrate that would fall more into like a in process 5%, or is that still, yeah, what would that go into? I think maybe the best way to say it is that keef considered a hemp item or a hemp concentrate?
I'll have
If
to ask
it's
your forgiveness on this one. I don't have it off the top of my head. I'd have to look,
Yeah.
but Seth, go ahead and chime in here.
Yeah, if it's separated using like water, it would be considered a concentrate. If it's separated just using mechanical means and it's dried trichome heads with plant material, like to me, I appreciate what everybody's trying to do with this, but I think we're getting into splitting very, very fine hairs. And the difference between keef and a constant, technically there is not, but it just comes
Right.
down to semantics.
And I think I would just point out this isn't about testing necessarily. This is about making sure that the local municipality doesn't get pissed off at us because we issued a license for something that your zoning doesn't allow. So
Okay.
the testing
This is
piece
more the
comes
endorsement
later.
side. Got it.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments about that piece? Okay. Pre-registration violations. Again, cleanup, clarification. Nobody clamoring. Grower research license. Just removing that date since we're in here, so that's a cleanup. Handler license. And then Danette, if you want to talk about handler endorsements, that would be a new rule here as well.
Yeah, so there's a couple reasons why I wanted to beef up this section. The reality of it is we don't have a great way of tracking who's making what kind of stuff, so that if there's, say, information or bulletins that need to go out to specific people, they can be better targeted. But my biggest issue has been concern over safety, specifically for the folks making extracts. The concern is whether the equipment used, which can be pretty volatile, is safe or not. So it seems pretty evident, based on explosions that you see on the news from time to time, that there should be more safety checks on that. So having a professional engineer, wherever they're from, go out and check off that, yes, your system looks like it's set up properly to operate safely, and having some SOPs written out so staff understands the machine, how to operate it, what maintenance is necessary and all that. Really is a matter of safety for them. It's a matter of safety for neighbors around these places, whether they be businesses or otherwise. It was just a really important thing to me, and also what we've heard back from folks in the community. Why aren't there more safety checks on these situations. That is really the big overarching reason for making sure that we plug this section in here.
Thanks, Danette.
And I'll add that when it comes to edibles, for example, there's also, again, along the lines with safety, requirements for food safety licensure and such that a lot of folks don't realize. So as we're going through saying, hey, these are the endorsements that you can get, and your local governing body is okay with it, they're going to check it off or not on the Lux. It'll also be a further avenue to really hone in on, if you're doing this, you need this additional license so that, you know, folks can ensure that the products that you're making are meeting safety requirements.
Yeah, this is Mike Noonan, Eagle Point. I think the safety of our products going out, and as whether it's topicals or edibles, the extra testing and oversight as far as from a company like ours and others, food safety and product safety is going to go a long ways. And we're going to grow and grow. But if Oregon's going to be the leader, we got to have a safe product to the consumer. And I think, Darnett, that this is a good start. And I think working with your local on your loops and how that goes, I think this couples together pretty good. And we got a long ways to go, but I think we're getting there.
Thanks, Michael. Okay.
It's Buddy Joe here. Wondering, so it says orally, consumed or ingested orally, but don't we have those other categories that the different buckets with the OLCC, with the milligrams, for suppositories and such. So if somebody's producing something or a patch, that's not, consumed orally, but just wondering how that works.
Okay. So you're looking at number 5 there. Bite in the mouth is considered a hemp edible. So we just need to make sure that hemp edible is consistent across all of the rules for testing, et cetera. Okay.
Great.
Thank you, Bunny Joe. Okay. Moving on to vendor site licensing. Thoughts, comments? Good with a comfortable pause. Okay. How the agency reviews applications. Primarily clean up and making it more consistent. A little more clarity around grow site maps. Yes. I get to do. Personally like this X that's highlighted in yellow. If you aren't in compliance and you're not paying your civil penalties, you don't get to keep participating.
And
Sorry,
that's
it seems
another
like a
example
fairness
that
thing.
was already within our statutes. We just hadn't spelled it out within this set of rules to make it clear and evident. And that's really what the goal was in spelling it out here.
I'm probably not supposed to take a position, but I like it. Okay. I think this is the same kind of thing. If you don't do what we ask you to do, or you fail it, you don't get to participate in the program. Okay. Handler applications and review. Let's talk about this one, Danette.
Yeah, so on the grower side, we require the property owner acknowledgement and permission form. It just seems like a no-brainer that a property owner should know what's going on their property. And, going back to that safety point again, I think that also ties into this. If a property owner isn't aware that, say, there is extraction going on that could be a safety issue, that could seem pretty unfair. But with any license, I think it's important that the property owner is fully informed and giving their permission. So it's the same form that I'm looking at implementing here, just changing the verbiage to handler language versus grower language.
I would also jump in, having some of the historical. Many of you on this call have the historical. We had situations where property owners would revoke lease agreements, etc., and then those businesses were not able to continue their business, and we had plant material in limbo. So this is a good protection for the business operator as well.
And of course, we can't prevent a property owner from revoking that consent anyway, but if they know up front that's what's going on, we're hoping that it's less likely that type of situation that Sunny just mentioned is going to happen.
Exactly. Okay. Again, if you're not following up on your agreements, we're not going to give you a license. Similar to the grower side. Anybody else wish our rules were smaller? Same for the hemp seed production. Just again, clarifying, if you're not paying your civil penalties or in a repayment plan, we will not renew or issue that license. Okay, moving on to reporting requirements.
What page are we on?
We are on bottom of page 35, going into solid page 36.
Okay, thanks. Mine's jumping around.
You bet. So yeah, section 400 reporting requirements. Anything you want to call out here, Danette?
Now I'll field questions if there's any on these, of course.
Okay.
Danette, this is Jeff. I'm sorry, I've been having trouble getting my mic turned back on for a second. Back about the seed production, without discussion, just again, demarking between seed production for flower production versus safe seed production for grain or fiber. Just a placeholder there.
Thanks, Jeff. Did you all drink your coffee this morning?
I'm waiting for page 45, Sonny.
Okay, get to page 45. It's like bingo. I'll get there soon. Okay.
I'm waiting for 47, just so you're aware.
Okay. Well, we'll just skip right on down then. Let's see, record keeping requirements. So we're on page 39, Bonnie Joe. Again, cleanup. Nothing huge here. 12 business days, giving you a little bit of time there on record providing. Okay, we're getting closer. Drying and storage. You have to tell us where you're going to do it. And if you have to move it, send us a form updating that information.
That's also a protection for our licensees. You know, sometimes we get calls, say, from neighbors or law enforcement saying, hey, is this place even licensed? And in the meantime, you know, I'm sure you've either experienced yourself or heard from others that they get a bit of guff from neighbors, for example, if they don't understand that there's, you know, a legal right to have it there. But if we are informed, then we can say, no, they have the legal right to have it there. That is part of their legitimate business.
Yep. Okay, transportation.
I had a quick question, I think.
Yep. Go
Okay,
ahead,
yeah,
Joel.
right there, actually on transportation. I
Okay.
was one early. There being I think the section 4 there being added. I don't know if testing's covered separately, but I'm curious first what documents would be required for that transportation. It seems just there's hemp, industrial hemp commodities don't require the same documentation as industrial hemp.
Did it? You're talking to Net, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was trying to catch up on notes. I want to make sure that every comment everybody makes is duly noted for me so I can go back and look at it. So we will need to tease that out with a bit of clarity there. You're right, there are differences. Basically anything that should be tested should have the COA in it. So we'll clean that up.
Any other questions or comments on this section?
Good.
Okay. Oh, we're getting closer, Seth. Okay, we're now talking about pre-harvest sampling and testing for THC. Clarifying definitions. From the lab. Seth.
Yeah, I was just looking at the LOQ and wondering out loud if that was an appropriate level. And I understand it's actually very generous, and I appreciate that. But if we're going to think about what an LOQ is, you know, you think about it as almost like a pixel on a screen. This is 2 pixels worth of resolution is all a lab is required to have to be doing test results. that's a pretty high LOQ in my opinion. I was just wondering if folks had other opinions on that. And this ties into the level of uncertainty as well, which I think is 10%, and that's on page 47. And I'm just looking at different labs and the way that they quantify that. And a lot of them, again, depends on whether or not you're going to hold them to that. A lot of them are in that range, 7 to 10%, and some of them are trying to figure out how to calculate that.
Thanks, Seth.
And I'll add here, thank you for that, Seth. We did consult ORLAP folks. We also consulted our reference lab, and where we combined the feedback we got from them to put sections that have changed for lab testing in there. And we'll continue to work with them on that. There might be some fine tuning there.
I don't know if David or Chris have any specific thoughts about that, being more lab folks.
Well, I mean, I can say that the 0.15 is what ORLAP requires of cannabis laboratories for the LOQ. So that's probably why they chose that. Typically, our LOQ for flower is significantly below that. Our LOQ for concentrates are just barely below that. So that is definitely an upper limit on it.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, we're on page 47. Bonnie Jo, I think you had thoughts on page 47.
Yeah, so I guess a little explanation on why the 10%, and then I'll go from there once I understand why that was changed to 10% for the measurement of uncertainty.
So this one again was with specific language and verbiage suggested by ORLAP folks. They hadn't completely 100% landed on this specific language, but this is what they proposed to put forth for sake of the RAC to, have a good solid point to either settle at or fine tune from. Quite frankly, I rely on ORLAP and lab folks to have a more in-depth stance on this. They're smarter than me when it comes to testing. I will readily admit that. So I'm kind of going with their guidance on that. But I will ask that specific question of them to further drill down into that.
Okay, because with labs, they're testing on their measurement of uncertainty is day by day, and so that's the on the lab end of things. My concern is with knowing from blind tests that were sent with flower material in 2019 that was submitted to USDA for the rules was, it was 33% was the measurement of uncertainty that was between five different labs. One of them there were six. One of them was thrown out because they had a 64% measurement of uncertainty, and we knew there was something really, really wrong there. Then it skewed the data. So Dr. David Gang from Washington State University removed that 64% measurement of uncertainty lab out of the comparison, and so that 33% was really more realistic of what a measurement of uncertainty would look like. But when we're talking about labs, each lab being different and each day being different, and that's the standard for looking, specifically at the measurement uncertainty per day. So that's, of course, that's my concern. But 10% is really, really low, and for it to be the determination to have to destroy a field, that's very onerous on everybody involved. But it's very concerning at 10%.
Thanks, Bonnie Jo. Chris?
And happy to provide that data if necessary.
Okay.
This
Chris?
a little bit. So our measurement uncertainty is actually calculated on an annual basis, and it's calculated from our measurements of our known blank spike that we take over several days, usually several weeks, to encompass a wide range of environmental conditions. But we are required to recalculate it annually, and typically for THCA, our uncertainty ranges in the 5 to 6% range. This year, it's just a little over 6%. It's been around 6% most years that we calculated. Last year was actually pretty low. It was calculated at 3%. So 10%, I would start to question the lab whose uncertainty would be over 10%. That would be a kind of a high uncertainty. And in fact, our blank spike requirements that ORLAP sets for us, we have to be within the target value plus or minus 10% by regulation. So if our uncertainty is over that, we're going to frequently be foul of regulations. And like I said, ours is typically 5 or 6%, and it is calculated annually.
Thank you, Chris. Okay. Moving on to failed pre-harvest testing and retesting rule. Giving folks a little more grace there, moving from 7 to 10 days. Businesses. Clarifying that between the calendar days. Just removing the, moving on to hemp microgains, page 52. Removing that effective March 1st, since we're a little bit past 2024 now. Moving on to cannabis waste and disposal.
And I just want to highlight a little detail on this. So there's always been a couple people that were wondering whether or not they need to fill out a CWD form, a cannabis waste disposal form, and go through that formal process if they are removing male plants. That has always been the case. We are just making that more clear in the rules. We actually had a couple growers concerned with the fact that there were other growers removing vast sections of their grow, saying, "Oh, it all hermed out, it all became male," and they wanted to remove that. And they were really concerned that that was a point of diversion, which would, of course, make their business unfair to the folks who are operating within the rules. So that seemed an important clarification there.
I was not aware that that was actually part of the rules to begin with, and I'm like, that was just one of the few items that I highlighted as problematic. So if I'm reading this right, a grower, if they see a male plant in their field, they have to submit documentation to ODA 7 days before they can legally go out and remove it. Is that accurate?
Yes. And of course, there's there's often circumstances where if somebody says, hey, this is really concerning, we're dealing with a male plant here, we don't want it to affect everything. It's very rare that you can't get hold of an inspector same day, because we make sure to have one on hand at all times, during the week at least, where you can say, hey, can this be expedited, please? And usually it can be. Not always, we can't promise that, but more often than not.
My only concern is that this goes against common farming practices, and it basically makes regular farmers who are just doing their job to do a good job of farming, it makes their job illegal. Nobody's going to wait 7 days to pull a male plant. If you see a male plant in a field, 7 days is enough time to have your whole field seeded. That plant's going to drop its pollen. So while I understand that this is just a formalization of what was already in the rules, I think having it brought to my attention, I think that might be something that we'd want to look at. I understand the diversion issue, but I just don't want, I don't think that we should have growers violating rules unknowingly by just being good farmers.
That's fair.
Yeah,
And I'm definitely willing to look at that some more and see if we can address that a little bit better. I appreciate you bringing that up.
This is Mike Noonan.
Yeah,
Actually, that's right.
Go
on
ahead,
the money
Mike,
on
and then
that.
Bonnie Joe.
Basically, what happens is, say we got 60,000 plants. I'm sitting in the field right now. We'll go through it. It's like growing spuds or grain. The diversion thing's a problem if they're cutting out major parts, and that shouldn't be happening in a normal operation. But I will tell you, we pulled out close to 46 male plants this year. I didn't know that rule exists, but we pulled 46 male plants out of 60,000. Okay. So you got to be through these fields daily as they change, because that's what happens. And you should be buying feminine seed. Heck, Seth sells it, and you shouldn't be taking out a majority of your crop. So I think the issue will be, are they using the practice as a common agricultural practice to take out 50 to 100 plants or 200 out of 60,000? Or are they using it as a diversionary tactic? So I think that probably does need addressed, because you'll be getting so many calls from just the average producer. It's just, that needs to be redefined.
Thanks, Michael. Bonnie Joe?
Just along the lines, that, if somebody is out having to pull every, 3 days, pull a plant here, pull a plant there, and they need to do it right away, trying to go back and find that male as well, there's all kinds of aspects, even bumping into that male plant. You need to be able to bag it and get it out in the field right away. So backing up what was said here, that is not good farming practices at all. And maybe there's that percentage per plants grown or acreage that if you're pulling 20%, say, there's some definite seed producers, breeders out there that aren't just capabilities. And I've heard of people in 2.5 acres having to pull 100 plants, but those are true males. We're not talking about Hermes. So that's very concerning.
Thanks everybody for your input on that.
Okay. We're on to page 55, enforcement and civil penalties.
I have one here, just
Yeah, go ahead, Joel.
So for in-process hemp material, is this still the 5% limit? Does that apply for product in transfer? And then what about on a site that's not being transferred? Is that the 0.3?
think so, but I will look to Danette.
I would think so, but it just, yeah, it didn't.
And forgive me, I was finishing up my notes. Could you give me that question one more time, please?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So with that, under that section, just regarding in-process hemp material, is the 5% THC limit apply to that, apply for that material in transfer? Or what about the material that's on a site that's not being transferred? Is because it's not being transferred, is that the 0.3 total?
Rather than try to answer that off the top of my head
Sure.
with so much other, back and forth here, I want to make sure to get a proper response to that. So
And I
will,
think
I will
that's
have
perfect.
to-
Yeah, I just want to call out things as I see them, and then I'm sure more needs to be dug into, but just noticing a gap there, I guess.
Right. I appreciate it. And nothing is being changed as far as the rules pertaining to that. We're just really laying these things out. So yeah, that's worth digging into some more.
Okay. Moving into violations and penalties, page 58. Legalese, just clarifying between attempting and offering. Page 59. I think these are things that we have had, but we're just, again, clarifying and laying it out specifically so we can point to it in the rule. Okay. Page 60, retail sale requirements, restrictions.
I had
Clarification
one
around
there
testing.
for
Yeah.
retail sale restrictions.
Yep.
It's on 3B. How does that specific one interplay with the in-state lab or lab requirement?
Great question. So we're on page 61.
Manufacturer in North Carolina, then do they need to get tested and do field sampling with someone there in Oregon?
That's been a big question. Basically, the way things are written right now, anything that is transferred in or out of Oregon needs to be tested. What's leaving needs to be tested by an Oregon lab as it currently stands. I haven't gotten any traction on looking at exceptions for that. So
I
the
think too,
verbiage here is what a combination of ORLAP and, well, actually this one specifically was ORLAP suggested language to address that, combined with our Department of Justice representative came up with this to try to make it a little bit softer, doing ISO or TNI accreditation being acceptable, so long as they're testing for everything that we require the testing happen for.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thanks for that.
Okay. Moving on to prohibitions on adulteration. Just clarifying that it's each unit of sale. Okay, so I think this might be an opportunity. Sometimes it's confusing in our rules. We've got kind of the pre-2000s are a lot about growing, licensure, pre-harvest testing, etc. When you get into the 2000 series, it's all about post-harvest, once it's moved off the farm into a handler or vendor, like what are the testing requirements? And just a reminder that those testing requirements are required by statute to mirror the adult use marijuana testing requirements, which are established by, David, I'm looking at you, Oregon Health Authority, with support from OLCC and ODA. So
That is correct.
just kind of getting in your head the difference here about what testing we're talking about specifically. So with that, we're on page 63, 2300. It's not included here, but these, I don't think. We do also have, oh yeah, it's down below 2310, a separate definition section that applies specifically to this in addition to the other definition section for the rules.
I had one question on the 2300, and I didn't check if it was addressed in the definitions below, but maybe you can just speak to that of just clarifying. It doesn't seem clear what that THC limit would be. Again, it's kind of that like 5% for transfer or no result needed for an industrial hemp commodity on that 2B there.
2B.
So yeah, I think the question is, what is that THC limit? Is it 5% for that transfer, or I guess being an industrial hemp commodity, what's that limit there?
It's going to depend on what the item is, I think.
Okay.
That is correct.
And so you'll see a lot of references back to like the OAR 333. That's the Oregon Health Authority testing rules. So.
And you'd refer then back to commodity or item or anything from there. Okay, thank
correct.
you.
Yeah.
Right. When you actually go to the OHA rules, the 333, they have tables in there too that says that clarify, what it is, what it's intended for, what's happening with it.
Okay, just updating the purpose to include the new date whenever we get these filed. Moving on to definitions. Again, these are for the 2300, 3000 series. All right. Hold on. Okay, I'm on page 72. Basically updating what TNI standards means. Moving into 2320, bottom of page 72. Again, or offering for sale or transfer. Making all of that match. Page 73, compliance testing requirements. A lot of just making all of this consistent throughout. Failed test samples. Don't remove it, keep it separate. Make sure we know you're not slipping your stuff that failed into your good stuff. Bottom of page 74, quality control. Again, consistency throughout with that attempting to be sold or transferred. Wondering if that should be offered, but we'll go back and double check that. Okay, bottom of page 75, general handler requirements. Dating that to make it more consistent. Okay, let's talk about this one, Danette. Handler policies and procedures. Is this a new one?
That is adding in from, frankly, our neighbors at OLCC who have been doing this for a while and have these laid out, again, going into safety factors for consumers, as well as, you know, how to properly handle everything in that process for the safety of the folks operating operating the machinery, operating the process.
Operating, inspecting, living next to, having businesses next to, etc.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
And I
Same with
hope
the
that a lot of
training.
folks already have a lot of this in their SOPs and such, just as a good business practice, let alone for safety in general, but just making it official.
Okay. Joel, I think that was you.
Yeah, I think on 78, the 3260, I was kind of assuming, yeah, that maybe this was coming over from OLCC, some of the verbiage. But curious if didn't you have consulted with like industrial operators? I'm just thinking with maybe the industrial side, which is kind of somewhat out of my personal wheelhouse, but there might be like a different stack of solvents that might want to consider, like in terms of just different types of industrial extraction. And just wanted to call that out, that there might be, yeah, different stack of solvents used than what we're used to in OLCC with a little bit more straightforward extraction. Might be worth talking to some processors in the space, just because I know with hemp extraction, there's just, you know, talk to Laurel Crest or any of these processors in Oregon, they're using different solvents generally than I was, you know, that I see generally in the more straightforward in OLCC.
That not being my wheelhouse, I was looking to probably just stick with what it is here, but if there are specific ones that you could direct me to,
Sure.
with some research behind it, I could bounce it off of folks with more expertise in it on that than I have.
Okay. Yeah. Happy to follow up
Thank
there.
you.
So Bonnie Joe here. So my understanding, you know, based on the bill, I don't remember what year it was from. Courtney could probably fill that piece in a little bit more. But the extractions and solvents and such, that was very clearly laid out in legislation.
You're saying which ones can be
Courtney?
used and which ones can't, Bonnie Joe?
Correct. But the way that it was written was didn't list out what was specifically allowed. It was more the extraction specifics. Courtney, can you help me out here?
I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about, Bunny Joe.
So the bill like 3 years ago, where it was very specific to what was the extraction specifics, what was allowed and what was not allowed. Does that
Are you talking about
specifically lay out the
3000 with
solvent? Yeah,
artificially derived definitions?
yeah. Well, no, but what extractions were allowed?
I'll have to go
What
back
type
and
of
take a look
extraction?
because I don't
Yeah.
remember
Yeah.
there being one. And you're specifically talking on the hemp side, not the marijuana side?
On the hemp side, correct.
Hmm. We'll go back and
Yeah,
take a
thank you
look
for
at
bringing
that.
that question to our attention. We'll dig in.
Okay. Um, page 80. New rule, I think. 3265, inhalable cannabinoid product handler requirements. or an update to it. I have reached the end of my document.
I didn't have a specific piece to any of the additions there, but just a general question if like this RAC or there'll be any opportunity to engage with OLCC specifically during the product registry rules process. So just in looking at how we get products registered, do you anticipate there being any comment period or a chance to participate with the specifics of that? Or would that be part of this RAC or something separate?
The public hearing was yesterday, Joel, and the comment
Perfect.
period is up until the 31st.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything about the language in the rules specifically that you didn't have an opportunity because I scrolled through a page too fast? If you don't have that, then I have very specific questions for you.
Well, I have one thing here.
Okay.
So when we're looking at the 603-048-3265, this will be replaced with the hemp registry rules if those rules are adopted by the OLCC before these rules take effect. Is there any way to add in consultation with the ODA and industry stakeholders?
So Bonnie Joe, that's just a note for this RAC. That's not going into the rules if we file them.
That makes
And
sense. Okay.
the statute requires that ODA work with OLCC on the registry. So it's been in
I'd kind of like to see
consultation.
that in. I'd like to see that in there solidified.
So it's not part
Yeah.
of our set of rules to specify that. It's already mandated that happen. So that's just part of the process, but not something to indicate in the rules that it's to be part of the process because it's indicated otherwise.
Okay.
This is just
being
to
picky.
address rules that licensees need to follow.
Okay.
So most of you on the RAC have worked with us before. Part of the process of filing these with the Secretary of State is indicating how these rule changes, not the rules themselves, but the rule changes will impact businesses, small businesses, fiscal impacts. So I'm really good at making stuff up, but I would love to have information from those of you in the industry about how this will impact you. Seth.
Specifically looking at the new restriction or the new requirements to denote doors, windows, entry and exit points on properties is going to take me at least 2 full days of my time when I redo all of my applications for this next year.
Yeah.
I think back, Bonnie Joe again, so back to the 2 points with the measurement of uncertainty, my concerns there, that could seriously impact any farmer out there and the complete supply chain by having that 10% measurement of uncertainty. But then
Okay.
also with the culling of males and having that time frame that both Seth and I are concerned about, that can ruin somebody's whole field and again affect the whole supply chain. So those are major concerns and how they will seriously affect farmers and all of their partners.
Thank you.
I'll of course encourage any written comments submitted to have your ideas on how to better address any of that as well. I appreciate the thoughts on that, on all of it.
A few years back, the legislature also asked us to talk about how this would affect racial equity in the state. Do you feel that any of these changes will impact people of color differently than folks who aren't people of color?
I need some time to, Bonnie Joe, again, I need some time to think about that.
Okay. You know how to get a hold of me, Bonnie Joe. Send me an email if you come up with something.
Okay.
Okay. Just as a reminder, we kind of talked about the process. I'm going to share my screen here real quick. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, ODA has a rulemaking webpage devoted to all things ODA rulemaking. Again, if you Google ODA and rulemaking, or you go to oda.direct/rulemaking, it'll bring you to this page. Really encourage you to subscribe to ODA's rulemaking email list. And then we are doing our best to provide as much information through the rulemaking process as we can. So for example, today's miscellaneous hemp rule updates, we have both the list of the RAC members, we have the RAC draft rules that we just looked at, the information about the meeting. At the end of this meeting, I will upload the video from today. So you or anybody that you're connected with in the industry can go back and take a look at that. Once those rules are filed, this whole body of information will show up under proposed rules open for public comment. You can either email those public comments, or we now have a form on our website where you can submit those comments directly to us. And then once the rules are finalized, they are kept for a year, again, with that whole body of information under the recently adopted rules. So if you are like, where is those draft rules? I can't find it in my email. You can go back to our rulemaking page and find it there. So barring any other questions or comments, I'm certainly happy to give you back some time in your day.
Sorry, Sonny, just a super quick question, and it's not related to these rules. I was just curious, since we've got Jeff here as well, if you guys wouldn't mind providing just a quick update on the adoption of the co-location of the research and grower licenses. Has that gone through yet? Is that?
Yes,
that's
it is
finalized?
final. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
And that all of that is available under the recently adopted rules.
Sweet. Thank you.
You bet.
Well, I want to thank everybody once again. I have a great respect for everybody who is actually doing this work. You're out in the field, you're in your lab spaces, trying to do your best to do things right. I really appreciate that. You guys are the experts on all that, so I wouldn't want to even attempt to make these rules in a vacuum. So your time is invaluable. Thank you so much.
Agreed.
Thanks for being open to the feedback. It's appreciated.